Hello and welcome to a deeper dive with me, Dara Cam. Today you're in for a special treat with Florida Justice John Couriel. This is the second of a two-part episode. Stick with us, Justice John Couriel.
The federal constitution is a paltry 9,000 words. The Florida Constitution is 41,000 words, and I think that tells you something about the differences between the two documents.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida.
One other difference between the U.S. Supreme Court and the Florida court is, I'm trying to find a way to phrase this, because if you say terms, it sounds like, you're in a term of office. Mm-hmm. But they meet from October through October. They take a summer vacation. Yeah. And so you know what's on their agenda. They have more of a clear agenda, perhaps. Is that a good way? You can tell me what the best way of saying it is. Whereas you guys, your opinions do come out on Thursdays, and there's usually a summer break, but we don't know when exactly you're going to be ruling on cases.
Yes. So I think... the tradition at the U.S. Supreme Court is that the business of the October term is concluded by the end of that term, including issuing all of the opinions. We don't have the same tradition in our court. We don't really have formal terms, although, as you said, we don't have oral argument it's actually 3 months out of the year. It's, July, August, and usually January, we don't have oral argument. I do think that, we make every effort to sort of keep in mind that the parties ultimately really care about having their cases resolved. And so we like to get things out in a timely manner. It's funny, the Latin motto of our court actually means fast enough if done right, which tells you something about the idea behind our court, which is that we're the last word for a great many things that matter a lot.
Right.
And so we want our work to reflect that and to be good. And so care is taken to make sure that when we put something out, it is our best work. I know that everybody on the court is focused on making our best work as prompt as possible. Nobody wants things to stick around for a second longer than it has to. And so I do my best. I think everybody does their best to try and get things out as quickly as possible.
So I'm right now watching a handful of cases. I've got them bookmarked on my browser tabs. Mm-hmm. Do you want to guess what they are?
No.
Okay. Well, I won't tell you that. What's it like when you guys are conferencing or talking about cases? How long do you spend? Is this a secret that you can tell us?
No, yeah, I can tell you.
So give us a peek behind the curtains. It's so ceremonial.
Yeah.
When you come into the courtroom, the doors open as if by magic, and the justices all enter the dais in their robes. There's a lot of pageantry involved in arguments. I always like to go in person. I know a lot of reporters, watch from the Florida channel. Shout out to the Florida channel. And actually, you can hear much better if you're home watching on the Florida channel than you can there in the courtroom. But I love the pageantry. Mm-hmm. But what's it like behind the scenes? Give us a peek.
In a word, collegial. We like each other. We get along. We confer after oral argument every time the oral argument is over, and we take preliminary votes on the cases that we have heard that day.
Right then.
We confer, we talk it through.
Well, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
How often do those preliminary votes match up with the ultimate vote?
I don't know. I don't have data for you, but what winds up happening is that you're not voting on just an outcome.
Right.
The reasoning matters, and so what you ultimately vote on, what each of us ultimately votes on, is a draft opinion that's generated by the lead justice. So every case is assigned a lead justice at random, and then if that person winds up in the majority, that person traditionally writes the majority opinion, sometimes with input from others. And then that opinion circulates among the 7 of us. And then there's a process of either concurring or dissenting, and sometimes suggesting changes or modifications to the reasoning. And so it's an iterative process. We talk. We go to lunch. We go to dinner. We go to breakfast.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah, no, it happens that the 7 of us on this court genuinely like each other, which is not always the case on any multi-member court. But one of the I thought one of my fears about the job going into it was that it was going to be very monastic, and I like reading and writing and being alone and all that stuff. But I also am not, a monk. I like to be with other people. I'm not a vow of silence kind of guy, and I've been surprised and gratified by the amount of collegiality on the job. The fact that I talk to at least one of my colleagues more or less every day by phone.
Right. Because you don't all live here. It used to be that they all used to live in Tallahassee.
That's right.
I think.
Which, by the way, is I think another great development, because it allows me and everybody on the court to do a little bit more of this.
Right.
I spend a lot of time going to things I would not have gone to if I lived in Tallahassee. I was at the Collier County Women's Bar Association a couple weeks ago. Actually, the day Justice O'Connor passed away, I happened to be there, and it was a great opportunity to reflect on her life. I go down to the Keys, and we'll go to the Monroe County Bar Association.
Don't let we want deeper dive listeners to think that you're just breaking out of the Supreme Court. I was going to ask you.
No, I think it's important.
You do speak a lot. And when I was telling some of my friends that you were going to be joining us for this podcast, they were very surprised, because they said, I don't think that the justices talk to reporters, let alone the public. So are you breaking with tradition, or is this just something that, other justices do? Or is it just, and why do you like to get out and talk to people?
So I think part of it is what a state court does as opposed to a federal court. We are the framers of our federal constitution understood that the states were going to be the policy battlegrounds for the things that most people cared most about, and state courts have a long history in our republic of being, courts that were open and accessible to people for the things that mattered most to them. They had a larger mandate than the federal courts did in terms of jurisdiction. Federal courts are courts of limited jurisdiction. My court is a court of specialized jurisdiction. The circuit courts and county courts of our state are really the people's courts. And you find, the matters that matter most to people, family issues and succession issues and, all of the critical life moments happen in state court. And so I think it is appropriate for members of our court, which is not just the state Supreme Court, the last word about many things, but is also responsible for the administration of the state courts, to be out and to not just out talking, but much more importantly, to be out listening. A lot of these community bar association type events that we all go to. So to answer your question, no, it's not. I don't think it's a break from tradition at all. I think all of us are sort of forward deployed and out meeting with local bar associations. And I think the reason is less for them to hear from us and more for us to hear from them.
What are you hearing?
Well, you hear all sorts of stuff. People, have all sorts of things they want to share about, right. The effectiveness of our courts in resolving disputes. And everybody has ideas about how to move things along faster.
Right.
People have views about, the quality of advocacy that they're getting from the bar, and they want to share it with us. The quality of lawyering they're getting. And those are all meaningful considerations. As part of the reason this is such a cool job is that in addition to doing the sort of blocking and tackling of resolving disputes, which is what every judge does, we have this administrative function in our court. The Chief Justice has it, and we all try to help the Chief to make sure that people have access to the courts, that the courts are working well, that disputes are funneling their way through, and people are, getting just results out of our court system.
One of the administrative functions the Chief Justice had was during the pandemic.
Yes.
And you were appointed during the pandemic, shutting down the courts, deciding when to open, what to open for, allowing for more long distance court cases. And you were appointed in 2020, and then it was over a year before your investiture ceremony. So you came into the court at a very odd time, in a very odd moment in history, where you weren't actually you didn't see people in person for quite a while, right?
Yeah, I think when the history is written of Chief Justice Kennedy's management of the pandemic, it will be a glowing history. And he did just an amazing job in getting the courts of this state back up and running as effectively and efficiently and quickly as he did. And Chief Justice Muniz has followed up, I think, admirably, very, very well. For my own part, it was a bit of a trial by fire. I had, I guess my nomination or appointment was announced on the 26th or 27th of May, and I got sworn in my backyard because everything was sort of shut down.
Wow.
And it just so happens that my predecessor on the court, Barbara Lagoa, lives sort of a block away from me. So she came over to my backyard, swore me in. I borrowed her father-in-law's robe.
Oh my goodness.
And I did my first oral argument that next week from my living room in a robe. So it was not, you were talking earlier about the pageantry.
Right.
I didn't experience any of that until sometime later when we were back in person.
You were already an old justice by then. It was already...
Well, I don't know about an old justice by then.
Well,
I feel like I'm still very new on it. It'll be 4 years in June, and I still feel like every day is a bit of a voyage of discovery. It's a great job in that way.
What's the biggest surprise that you've encountered since you joined the court?
So I referred earlier to the fact that it's much more collegial than I anticipated. Yeah. Most people, when they watch court shows on TV, they have the image of the single judge on the bench, right? The sage on the stage, if you will. And that individual has sort of a unilateral ability to be wise and figure things out on his or her own. The reality is, at least on a multi-member court, we're always talking. And I ultimately decide which way I'm going to vote in a particular case. Ultimately, that is my decision, but it's 100% of the time informed by what I'm hearing, not just from the advocates, but also from my colleagues. That sort of collaborative decision-making is partially a surprise to me. If it's not a surprise, I hadn't really internalized how collegial it was going to be.
You hadn't served as a judge
Nope.
Prior to being appointed to the court. And even though judges do, as you say, it's the sage on the stage when you're not on an appellate court, there probably is a lot more, give and take among their colleagues when they're serving on a circuit court or county court even.
Yeah. No, we've got a pretty good spread of experience on the court. We have so the chief, Justice Muniz, and I are the two who were not judges at the trial court.
I've known him since he worked for Governor Bush. Was it Governor Bush?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. No,
I've known him since then.
He's a superhero.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. So he and I are the two sort of odd men out. We never did never had the benefit of a trial court expertise or appellate court expertise. And so when we're considering a decision and it has meaningful implications about how trial court judges do their work, we listen really hard to what Justice Labarga, Justice Grosshans, Justice Francis, Justice Sasso have to say because they've been there. But I do think it's good that we have sort of a spread of experiences, a diversity of experiences.
You are newish to the court, and I wanted to ask this because I wrote a big story about this several years ago. I did a lot of research. I looked at all the old the disciplinary cases against judges that the court has considered since they were posted online, so going back maybe 20 years. And it was really interesting because I saw this pattern emerge that the court is getting, the court which can sanction, has the authority to sanction both attorneys and judges. The court has become, the sanctions have become harsher, and there are more of them now. And I know there are more judges than there used to be, but I was wondering if there's any, without speaking to any particular case, if you can share with us a little of the approach the court takes to sanctioning, I mean, some of the cases we've seen are just crazy, and I won't identify any of them, but particularly with the judges. And now there's social media, so stuff is caught on video or whatever. There's video in the courtrooms or in the courthouses. Is there an approach that the court takes towards these types of sanctions?
Yeah, I think what I would say is, first of all, our cases speak for themselves, and we've articulated what our approach is in these cases. Speaking more generally, I think the oath that we all take when we become attorneys is the ultimate guide for if you're trying to predict what is going to get our attention and what really matters to our court. A good way to check is go back to the oath of attorney and compare the alleged misconduct, or what the evidence shows the misconduct to have been, with the oath people took when they became lawyers or judges. Because, we are all human beings and all fallible. And if men were angels, there would be no need for us as judges, or there would be no need for the law. So we are always, in every single case, attuned to the humanity of the people who appear before us. But we're also attuned to the humanity of the people who rely on judges and lawyers in our system. The clients, the defendants, the victims, the people in our system who have entrusted lawyers and judges with a tremendous amount of trust on these incredibly important matters. And when a lawyer or a judge fails to live up to the oath that we take as professionals, that's a big deal. And it's a matter of almost like public safety for us as a court and as a state to make sure that the people who get to do this important work for people, defending their rights, articulating their claims, defending against their claims, that those people are operating with the best interest of their clients and of the society at heart.
It goes towards the trust in the system.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, right? Whether people can trust their judicial system or not. And there's a lot of distrust in all branches of government right now.
Yes.
I don't, again, this might be something that we can't discuss, but I recently was paying very close attention to this committee that Justice Muniz created to delve into, to explore potential consolidation of the circuit courts. And the reason that I brought this up is I was thinking, you mentioned going down to the Keys, and you mentioned being out speaking to people and what people are talking about. And I was surprised at the degree, I should say, anyone who knows anything about this issue, overwhelming opposition to the idea of shrinking any particular circuit or the circuits in general. But particularly among the Monroe County folks who came out, en masse. They didn't exactly threaten to secede again, but, it wasn't far off. And I mean,
I have a place in the Keys, and every so often I think about seceding too. I get to just stay there.
That's where you get to go?
Yeah.
When everything goes to hell in a handbasket,
exactly.
That's where we'll find Justice Couriel. But it was very illustrative to me, as somebody who's been watching the court for decades now, of how strongly people feel. And I'm not just talking about the electeds. Like, of course, the people who would be directly impacted, the PDs and the the state attorneys and whatever, their jobs would change. But I mean, just regular people really did seem to care about this, and it was interesting to me. people care about the government that's closest to them. Everybody's paid a traffic ticket, or, if you've gotten a divorce or you've had any kind of interaction with the justice system, in most cases, it's happened right on your home turf.
Of course. Yep.
Yeah. So you guys, the sanctions, I guess, going back to that, is a way of trying to ensure trust in the system.
That's right. I think that's right. And, on the consolidation issue, the committee, the work group that we put together to do that has just tendered its report, and that's a case that's before us. So I shouldn't say much more about it than to say how much I appreciate the work that those folks on the work group did to put it together, and also how much we appreciate the fact that people came and spoke.
Did you watch any of the meetings?
Of course.
Okay,
of course.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about before we get to your political career.
Oh, goodness.
You brought it up, sir. You opened the door and I walked right in.
That's fine.
I wanted to ask you about just the general workload of the court. I don't think a lot of people really realize what you all do. In fact, someone was telling me the other day that they thought that, like, what do they do for their real jobs? That this was just a part-time job.
My mother-in-law was horrified when she learned that this was not part-time. She learned the hard way that I had to leave the firm, and that was a bitter pill.
Right. So long to those whatever.
People ask me if I miss it, and sometimes I say I miss it one day a month.
You get paid monthly, right? But what is the workload? What do you do? What is the bulk of your time spent on? I know you do a lot of, the capital cases.
Well, we get all of them. We get all.
Yeah.
So every single. All right. So the jurisdiction of our court is set forth in the Florida Constitution. It's Article 5, Section 3B. And if you've never read the Florida Constitution, listeners, read it. The federal Constitution is a paltry 9,000. Perfect 9,000 words. The Florida Constitution is 41,000 words, and I think that tells you something about the differences between the two documents. The federal Constitution is, a constitution structurally that limits the powers of the federal government, and the state, it is left to the state to address all sorts of other stuff that touches people's lives, among them the jurisdiction of our court. And there are some cases that our court gets always. We get every single death penalty matter. We pass upon the validation of bonds and public debt, rate-making cases. And then the other sort of flavors of cases that we get have to do with harmonizing the law statewide. So if there is a express and direct conflict between one or more of the district courts of appeals and either us or another district court of appeals, we may take that case and resolve the express and direct conflict. When a statute has been declared constitutional or unconstitutional by a lower court, we can take those. And so it is not a court that is open to absolutely every kind of error. For that, we rely on the district courts of appeal, which are functionally the end of the road for a great many matters in our state. So what the job consists of is sort of set forth there, Article 5, Section 3B. That's sort of our diet. I've told people that the job is extremely heavy, but not stressful. And what I mean by that is every single thing we decide is a tremendous moment, whether it is a capital case or the constitutionality of something that the voters have passed or the legislature has adopted. These are all really weighty concerns. But we're not being pulled in 1,000 different directions. We're sort of allowed to do our work in a way that I think is very sound. You want us to have the bandwidth to focus on these matters, and we do. Every day is a hard day on this job. It is a very hard job. But I don't feel, the analogy I've used is, if being on a trial court is like running, being on this court is like swimming. It's really good cardio, but there's very little stress on the joints. There's very little in the way, there aren't unpleasant surprises pulling at you and, facts that come up all of a sudden in a trial. Those are sort of resolved below. And by the time we get a question, our job is to reason to the right answer and to explain our work, show our work clearly. And that can be really hard, but it doesn't tend to be stressful exactly.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Florida Supreme Court Justice John Couriel.
Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Welcome back to A Deeper Dive with Dara. Is there one area that takes up more time than others? Is it? I for a while it was capital cases.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the case now or not.
I don't know about that. I don't have data for you, but I every single capital case gets the full attention of the entire court and all of our staff. So it is true that the capital cases are extremely important. There's nothing more important than the capital cases. But I don't know that means that they take up a numerical majority of the hours worked or anything like that. And certainly it depends a little bit on whether or not the governor, whoever the governor is at that time, is the pace at which he or she is signing death warrants.
Yes.
Which is another thing that people don't really understand. You know, most people who are sentenced to death don't die by execution.
Right.
They die of natural causes on death row, because there is that one more step that, again, most people just don't know. The governor signs a death warrant for people who've been sentenced to death, and then there's, an appellate process that happens after that. And that, by the way, has happened only after the completion of all the appellate litigation that somebody can do, all the way up to, the U.S. Supreme Court, both to challenge and appeal their sentence and to collaterally attack it using federal and state habeas. So
we could spend a whole
I'm sure
talking about capital cases, or not. I could be talking about them and you could be saying yes.
That's right.
or no, or nothing.
I hope I'm not boring.
No, you're not boring at all. I'm just saying anyway, so you are not boring at all. Let's just make that perfectly clear.
Thank you.
When I said you're talking about, the different kinds of cases that you all, when I said that I was able to recognize, or I thought, I prided myself on spotting your voice to me in that opinion. Did that surprise you?
No.
Or do you all can you recognize your colleagues' voices, and how much leeway do you feel you have to be able to express yourself the way you want to?
I mean, you have all the leeway in the world. I hope to let the facts and the reasoning shine through, and for me to appear sort of as little as possible. It does seep through. Mm-hmm. You can definitely, like any writer, I'm sure I have a voice that sounds different from other writers, and that, in effect, I think is just a result of what we've read. I tell my law clerks all the time that the most predictable source of good writing is good reading. And so we're all sort of a product of what we've read. And so what you're probably reading or hearing in my voice is just other influences I've had. And I think that's okay. I try to purge my decisions of fat, of
adjectives.
You
make a great reporter. Then.
So Strunk and White is a gift I send to every one of my law clerks. As soon as I hire them, I send them like a care package, and it consists of Strunk and White, The Elements of Style, which is a book I recommend to everybody who wants to write for a living. And I send them The Old Man and the Sea, because I think it's a great...
One of my favorites.
Great, just small volume that
Very
contains
small, yeah.
multitudes in it, and it's
Very stripped down.
It's stripped down and
style.
clear. It's clear, and it you can read it without a fancy education and derive more from it than someone with a fancy education might, because it's so perfectly and tightly written. And I strive to write in a way that is true to those values. I'm no Hemingway, but I do what I can to make our work accessible. I always feel better when I know my mom or my dad has read one of my decisions and understood it.
Right.
Even if especially if it's something that's very complicated or boring.
That's catnip for a reporter,
I just, part of what I'm thinking, and I think this is true of all of my colleagues when we're writing, is we do want people to actually understand what we're doing here. And it is very easy to, if we cede that ground, if we aren't clear and we aren't comprehensible, it sort of allows other meaning makers out there to come and put words in our mouth and to sort of say what really the court did or what really the court said. It's very hard to say, well, the court actually did X or Y or Z if we've just been clear about what we've decided.
they can't attribute meaning
correct
to it.
Yeah, there's a sort of semiotic clarity and agency to it.
So are you a grammar nerd?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am reading this book. I have bought 3 copies of it, and I've given 2 away, and I've given 1 away, and I have an extra one at home. I'm going to bring one by the court for you.
I would love that. What is it?
It is called Rebel with a Clause.
Oh, that's a great title.
Have you heard of the grammar table lady?
No.
Okay, so she's this grammarian who I believe I don't know where she used to work, but anyway, she has this little card table, and she sets it up all around the country. She's traveled to every state, and she has all these different Strunken White and Chicago style book, AP style book, dictionaries. She has them stacked up on her table, and she has a little sign there saying, have a grammar question? Ask me a grammar question. And so the book is all of the questions
that sounds awesome.
that people have asked her. And she's got little drawings in it. Okay, I'm going to drop it by...
I promise to make good use of that.
I think you're allowed to accept a gift
I
from me.
I am. And I'll put it on my Form 6 disclosure.
Oh, I can't wait to show up on your Form 6. We're almost getting done here. I have 2 more questions. The one topic that I wanted to discuss with you was, you mentioned your foray into politics.
Yep.
You joke about it.
Yeah.
You've brought it up here today, and every time I hear you speak, not during arguments, obviously, but you mention it. And you lost you ran in a Senate race against a former Senate president.
I ran against Gwen Margolis in 2012.
Yeah, and that was a plus 20-something Democrat.
Yes.
Did you think you were going to win that race?
Everybody who runs for office, I think, hopes that he or she will win. I understood that it was going to be a very tough race, and I didn't run to win necessarily that first time. I ran hoping, obviously, that I would win, but knowing that I was standing for something.
Right.
And Senator Margolis was a great teacher in her way. First of all, she beat me by, close to 40 points. She cleaned my clock, notwithstanding the fact that I had knocked on tens of thousands of doors and raised a lot of money. And it was a great lesson, and I think the primary lesson is the one I shared earlier, which is it taught me a great reverence for the people who actually managed to get elected to the Senate, the House, the governor. Those are people who have a special trust placed in them that wasn't put there by accident. I have a very high opinion, actually, of voters. And I take it very seriously when someone has a mandate to participate in the legislative process. I think that person's entitled to a great degree of respect.
Do you ever feel like there's people who've been elected who maybe didn't deserve to be there?
Of course, but who deserves to be anywhere? I don't deserve to be where I am.
Why not?
I'm not on this court, Dara, because I deserve it. I'm on this court because the governor saw fit to nominate me, to appoint me to this position, and then the people of Florida retained me. I don't know if that has anything to do with my desert. It has to do with my being in the right place to do a service at the right time. And I don't know that people get elected because they deserve it as much as because they are effective at, and this is what's worthy of respect, capturing the will and direction of the electorate and then acting on that mandate. It's not a question of, the exemplary life that they've lived or anything like that. It's that they managed to catch the will of the people right and to be a faithful representative of it.
Has your experience with legislative politics, has that affected the way that you approach, the way that your approach to, I don't want to say governing as a justice, but as,
I don't, because I don't really govern.
No, but in your consideration of cases?
It does in this way. It gives me a lot of respect for the legislative process, to the extent that I have a deferential direction. It is toward the people who actually have a mandate to say what the law ought to be, to go back to where we started. And that's a lesson learned, through a lot of doors slammed in your face when you're knocking on doors in the middle of the summer and, and you're trying to get...
And you're a Republican and there's a lot of Democrats in that district.
That's right. So I have a respect for the folks who actually do it. I don't look down on them at all. I don't think, I think there was a time when it was fashionable for judges to, throw stones at legislators and to impugn legislators' motives and to look down on the legislative process as somehow uncouth. Or that's not the current mode of our work. It's not the mood of our court. We have a great degree of deference consistent with the Constitution for the legislative and executive branch.
Well, Justice Couriel, I have one, before I ask my last very important question, I want to thank you again for coming in person to join us. It has been really, when I say I was giddy, I wasn't joking.
No, I was really excited too, because I really do think that if somebody is interested in learning a little bit about the work of our court and how it fits in our state's government, I wanted this to be a resource for them. I wanted them to be able to listen to this and hopefully emerge with a little bit more of an understanding of what we do and what we don't do.
Is there anything that you wanted to say that I didn't?
I think you did. You're the best in the business.
Oh, geez, I should end there, but I have a more important thing to end on. I heard during your investiture ceremony that you snuck away from a Cub Scout event to meet a president of the United States.
I think I have now met 7 presidents.
Okay. Well, now this was a good question to end on.
Yeah.
I came up with that on my own little self. So please tell us which presidents you've met and which one you ran away from the Cub Scout, absconded from the Cub Scout event to meet.
Certainly have met both Presidents Bush. I met Gerald Ford, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Donald Trump. Who am I missing that I've met? I didn't meet Reagan. Maybe it's 6.
See, 2 Bushes, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama,
and Gerald Ford. So maybe 6, not 7.
Ford.
Did I ever meet Jimmy Carter? I'll tell you that my favorite was meeting Gerald Ford because it was the longest conversation I had. I was in college and he came to speak to our student group, and it was set up as a lunch, and I just had the good fortune to be seated next to him.
Oh my goodness.
And so we talked about football. Of course, he was, very decorated, college football star at Michigan, and then played briefly professionally, and, was an extremely kind and gracious human being. I also can't say enough about just the humanity of all of those people have in common, actually, is that person to person, they all have a ability to make you feel seen. And I think without regard to party, what all of them had in common was I felt like, I was in the presence of somebody who had been made to feel very small by the challenges of the office, but also was, a powerful personality. So I really enjoyed all of that. I have a tremendous amount of regard for people who try to do the right thing in public life. It's not easy. It's an extremely demanding career. It is not financially lucrative if it's done right. It takes a toll on your family. It's tough, and it's very, very easy to lose your bearings, right? It's very easy to get caught up in the noise and the celebration. But I think by and large, the people who do this work are, especially the ones you don't really hear very much about, are trying to do their best.
Well, Justice John Couriel, sitting right here with me in the Terracotta Room, it has been my absolute pleasure to speak with you today, and I hope you come back again sometime soon.
Mine too, Dara. I had a great time, and you're welcome to come and visit us at the court. Not just you, but all of your listeners. Come and watch oral argument, whether in person or obviously on the Florida channel, but come on by and visit. We're doing, we're renovating the court's tour at the moment. The pictures and the sort of exhibits that greet you when you come and visit the court. Also, I want to put in a plug for the Supreme Court Library. It's one of the least utilized spaces in Tallahassee. It has Wi-Fi. It has air conditioning. Come and work there. Come and use it.
Hang out. Come on and chill at the Florida Supreme Court.
This has been great, Dara. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC, and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.